My parents gave my sister a chain of malls and left me a single empty store. Good luck selling air, they mocked. But when that store became more valuable than all of theirs, they panicked. Hey everyone, before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. Hey Reddit, my name's Ethan. I'm 30 and I run a tech startup now, but a few years ago, I was just the family's afterthought. This is the story of how my parents tried to humiliate me only to end up begging for my help. So some background. My family owns a massive chain of shopping malls. My dad built the business from the ground up, and my mom handled the management side. My sister Claire wasn't some prodigy or business genius. She was just their favorite, the one they always believed in. If I succeeded, it was expected. If she succeeded, it was a victory. 3 years ago, my parents decided it was time to pass down the legacy. Claire got a chain of fully operational high-end malls, and me, I got one store. Not a profitable store, not even one in a good location. No, they handed me the deed to a completely abandoned rundown space in a dying shopping district, like it was some kind of joke. Consider it a challenge, my dad said, sipping his whiskey. Let's see if you have what it takes. Claire nearly spit out her drink laughing. Oh my God, you're serious. What's he gonna sell, air? Mom smiled like this was perfectly reasonable. My father just looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I gripped the deed so hard my knuckles turned white. Thanks, I said through clenched teeth, but inside I was humiliated. Claire leaned forward, still grinning. Maybe you can turn it into a thrift store. Sell all the dreams you couldn't achieve. That one stung. I left that night feeling like garbage, but I also left with something else, a plan. They thought they gave me a useless piece of property. What they didn't realize was that the world was changing. Malls were dying. Brick-and-mortar retail was struggling. But I had something they didn't, the ability to adapt. I turned that empty store into a fulfillment center for online brands. Fast, efficient, last-mile logistics for e-commerce sellers who needed a distribution hub. Within a year, we were profitable. Within 2, we were scaling. Meanwhile, my sister's malls, they were bleeding money. Foot traffic was dropping, stores were closing, and the real estate market was shifting. And then one day I got a call from my dad. Ethan, he said, clearing his throat, we need to talk about your business. I leaned back in my chair. Now they wanted to talk. When my dad called me into his office, I knew something was up. The last time we had a business talk, I was 16, and he explained why my first job wouldn't be in his company, but somewhere I could learn humility. That was his favorite word when it came to me, humility. Now, sitting across from him, I saw the same expression he wore back then, calm, authoritative, and completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath my surface. Jake, he began, leaning back in his leather chair, the faint scent of whiskey lingering. We've been looking at your business model. We? I raised an eyebrow. He ignored that. You've done well for yourself, but you know logistics is a complicated field. It's not like running a mall. It requires infrastructure, investments, partnerships. We think it would make sense for you to fold your business into the family company. There it was. I should have seen it coming. My dad never acknowledged a win unless he planned to take it. I glanced at the framed newspaper on the wall behind him. It was an old article about the opening of his first mall, with a quote I had memorized as a kid. A business is only as strong as the vision of the man leading it. He used to tell me that every morning before school, and every time I'd imagine myself standing in his place, being the son he actually respected. I exhaled slowly. So let me get this straight. You didn't believe in my business when I started. You laughed when I tried to prove myself. But now that I'm outperforming you, you suddenly want me back in the family fold? What's next? I report to Natalie? Don't be ridiculous. His tone hardened. This isn't about Natalie. This is about the company. We've been through a rough patch. Foot traffic is down 40%, I cut in. Tenants are pulling out. Your malls are becoming ghost towns. Meanwhile, last-mile fulfillment is booming. That's why you're here, right? You need what I built. Silence. A year ago, I would have killed for his approval. I would have folded in a heartbeat, eager to be part of the empire. But that was before I learned the most important business lesson of all, leverage. And I had all of it. Jake, be reasonable. My mother interjected from the corner of the room. I hadn't even noticed her sitting there. This is an opportunity for us to work together as a family again, like we always wanted. I laughed. Since when was I part of we? My dad's expression darkened. Son, we're offering you a chance to secure your future. Don't let pride blind you. I leaned forward. You're offering me a chance to save your future, not mine. His knuckles tightened on the desk. Wow it, Jake. We're giving you a way back in. You think you can do this on your own forever? Business isn't just about ideas. It's about power, connections, long-term strategy. You'll see soon enough. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he told me at 15 that I wasn't CEO material. That memory burned in my mind. I had spent my entire childhood watching my father shape Natalie into his heir, business dinners where she was introduced as the future, strategy meetings where I was told to sit quietly and learn. When I was 12, I tried to impress him by presenting an idea for an online mall, years before e-commerce exploded. He brushed it off. Physical retail will never die, Jake. People like to touch what they buy. That's how the world works. Except it wasn't. And now here he was, asking me for a lifeline. I stood up, adjusting my watch. You were right about one thing, Dad. Business is about power, and right now I have it. So no, I won't be merging with you, but I will be watching as your empire crumbles. I turned and walked toward the door. Jake, my mother called after me, a desperate edge in her voice. Don't do this. We're your family. I paused. Then, without looking back, I said, funny. You never seemed to think that when I was losing. And with that, I left. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I expected fallout. I expected anger. What I didn't expect was desperation. The day after I turned my father down, I started getting calls. First from my mother, then from my sister, then from board members of the family company, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. I ignored every single one. By the end of the week, the media caught wind of the story. Mall empire in decline. Can traditional retail survive the e-commerce boom? Natalie Parker struggles to save family legacy as tenant exodus continues. Emerging tech CEO Jake Parker on track to revolutionize logistics industry. That last one, that was about me. For the first time in my life, my name wasn't attached to them, and they hated it, a family on fire. It started with small moves. Natalie went on a PR blitz, giving interviews where she downplayed my success and framed our family struggles as temporary. Dad started making subtle legal threats. Nothing direct, just veiled warnings about the importance of protecting intellectual property. And then came the worst part, Mom. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. She never did that. When I opened the door, she looked around like she'd stepped into a stranger's home. This is nice, she said finally. Yeah, I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's mine. She sighed. Jake, we need to talk. I didn't move. You mean I need to listen? Don't be like this, she said, pressing a hand to her forehead. The situation is out of control. Your father is under enormous stress. Natalie is barely holding things together, so she flinched at my cold tone, so she repeated, this is your family. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, now we're family? When I was busting my ass to prove myself, I was just the outsider. The experiment. The one you didn't take seriously. But now that things are falling apart, suddenly, we're blood. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Jake, she said softly, we need you. I stared at her. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say those words, and it was too late. No, I said, you don't. You need a bailout, and I'm not interested. Her face hardened. This isn't just about business. Do you think it's fun for us to watch our son turn his back on us? To see you side with the people trying to tear us down? That was when I realized she genuinely thought I was the villain, like I hadn't been forced out of the family years ago, like I was the one who had betrayed them. I took a slow breath. You have 5 seconds to leave before I call security. Her lips parted in shock. You wouldn't. I pulled out my phone. 4. She swallowed hard. Then with a stiff nod, she turned and walked out. I watched her go, my chest tight. Then I closed the door and locked it. The war begins. If my rejection had been a wound, the next few weeks turned it into an all-out war. First, my permit started getting delayed. Then, out of nowhere, the lease for my fulfillment center came into question. And then my investors started getting nervous calls, subtle warnings that maybe my business wasn't as secure as it seemed. I knew exactly who was behind it, and I wasn't about to let them win. Flashback, the day I knew I was done. I was 17 when I realized I wasn't part of their world. We were at a family charity gala, one of those over-the-top events where people wrote big checks just to have their names printed in gold lettering. Dad had just finished giving a speech about legacy when someone came up to him and Natalie. They shook hands, laughed, talked business. I was right there. He didn't introduce me. He didn't even look at me. I could have been invisible. That was the moment I knew if I ever wanted to be respected, I had to build something of my own. And now, years later, I had, and they were terrified. The power move. I called a meeting with my team. We're accelerating expansion, I said. I want 3 new centers in the pipeline now. My CFO frowned. Jake, that's aggressive. The budget is covered, I said, tossing a folder on the table. Inside, a new round of funding, bigger than any deal my father had ever made. My head of operations whistled. Jesus, who are these investors? I smirked. The same people betting against him? Because here was the truth. Dad and Natalie weren't just losing tenants, they were losing relevance, and I was making sure the world knew it. Checkmate. 2 weeks later, Dad called me. I let it ring. Then he texted, we need to talk. I responded with a link to the latest headline. Jake Parker's logistics empire expands. The future of retail is online. A minute later, he texted back, this is your final chance. I smiled and typed my reply. You had your chance. You gave it to Natalie. Then I blocked his number. Because I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was winning my own. I knew they would break before I did. But I didn't expect it to happen this fast. It started with whispers, investors pulling out, mall tenants breaking their leases early, headlines that went from retail struggles to Parker empire on the brink of collapse. Dad tried to downplay it, of course. It's a temporary downturn, he told the press. We're restructuring. Natalie said in an interview, her smile just a little too tight, but behind closed doors, they were drowning, and I was the one increasing the pressure. The desperate offer. One night, just as I was leaving my office, my assistant poked her head in. There's a man downstairs, she said hesitantly. Says he's your father. I felt a flicker of something. Victory, amusement, maybe just satisfaction. Send him up. A few minutes later, my father stepped into my office. He looked older than I remembered. The stress was eating at him. His suit was impeccable, but there was something off about him. like a king who knew his throne was crumbling beneath him. I leaned back in my chair. To what do I owe the pleasure? He didn't waste time. We want to make a deal. We. I almost laughed. He still couldn't come alone. He still had to act like this was some corporate discussion, like he wasn't personally begging his son to save him. I motioned for him to continue. You know our position, he said. The real estate market is shifting. We've had setbacks, but with the right partnership we can. Don't lie to me, I interrupted. What do you actually want? A muscle in his jaw twitched. We need liquidity. We need stability. You need me. Silence. The word hung in the air, thick with everything he refused to say out loud. I let the silence stretch. This was the moment, the one I had dreamed about for years. The powerful Richard Parker, the man who had dismissed me, underestimated me, treated me like an outsider in my own family, now sitting across from me, needing me, and I wasn't about to let him off easy. I folded my hands together. What's your offer? His expression remained unreadable. A controlling stake in Parker Holdings. You take over operations. Natalie steps down. That almost caught me off guard. You're throwing Natalie under the bus? He exhaled sharply. She wasn't prepared for this level of crisis. She's struggling. Translation. She failed. I thought about how she had laughed in my face when they handed me that worthless store. Sell air, little bro. Now she was drowning, and Dad was cutting her loose to save himself. I should have felt sorry for her. I didn't. I stood up, adjusting my sleeves. No deal. Dad's head snapped up. What? I don't want a stake in Parker Holdings, I said. I want all of it. His face turned red. You can't be serious, I smiled. I am. I'll buy out the entire company, every mall, every property, every failed investment. You walk away with whatever dignity you have left. His fingers curled into fists. That's not going to happen, I shrugged. Then we have nothing to discuss. I turned toward the window, dismissing him like he had done to me 100 times before. Jake, his voice was tight. This is your family's legacy. I looked at him over my shoulder. No, it's yours. I was never part of it, remember? For the first time, something in his face cracked. A flicker of something. Regret. Panic. Didn't matter. I had already won. The fall of an empire. A week later, the official announcement hit the media. Parker Holdings declares bankruptcy amidst financial crisis. The mighty empire my father built, gone. Natalie went silent. No more smug interviews. No more social media posts flaunting her power. My mother called. I didn't answer. The world watched as the Parker name crumbled. And then when they were at their weakest, I made my move. I bought everything at a fraction of what it was once worth. I didn't keep the malls. I raised them. In their place, I built the future. Tech-driven logistics hubs, state-of-the-art distribution centers, the same industry they mocked me for. It was now their replacement. And when the last of their old empire was demolished, I stood there watching the dust settle. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving I never needed them, that I had always been worth more than they ever believed. And now they had nothing. The aftermath. A month later, I got one last call. Natalie. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. I answered. Natalie? She exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping. Well, you finally got what you wanted. No, I corrected. I got what I earned. A long silence. Then soft. So what happens now? I considered that. Then I smiled. Now, I said, now I build. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt something. But as I stood in the glass-walled office of my brand new headquarters, watching the city skyline stretch before me, I realized the truth. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning, the last attempt. A week after I finalized the buyout, my mother showed up at my office. No appointment. No warning. She just walked in. My assistant tried to stop her, but she had that look, the same one she used when she wanted something, and refused to take no for an answer. Jake, she said, stepping into my office like she still had authority here. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. I doubt we do. She exhaled sharply. Enough of this. You've made your point, but you're destroying this family. I laughed. I destroyed the family? I was never part of it. Remember? She flinched, but recovered quickly. You are part of it, and that means something. No, it means something to you, now that you've lost everything. Her lips pressed together. You don't have to be cruel. I tilted my head. Funny, that never stopped any of you before. She smoothed her perfectly ironed blazer. Your father is struggling. Good. She inhaled sharply. Jake? No, really, I said. That's good for him. Maybe now he understands what it's like to have everything you built dismissed. To have doors slammed in your face. To be told you're not enough. She looked down at the floor, silent. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked small. I let the silence stretch, then finally said, Why are you really here? She met my gaze. Your father wants to see you. I raised an eyebrow. Him? At home, she continued. It's not good, Jake. He's not himself. I almost told her I didn't care. I wanted to say it, but some part of me, some part I hadn't quite killed off yet, was curious. So I went. The last conversation. The Parker estate was nothing like I remembered. The lawn was overgrown. The grand entrance that once housed luxury cars now had an empty driveway. The house itself, it looked smaller. Dad was in his study, sitting in the same leather chair where he had once dismissed me. Only now he wasn't some untouchable king. He looked tired, older, beaten. When he saw me, his expression flickered between pride and bitterness. You really did it, he murmured. Yeah, I said, I did. He nodded slowly. I underestimated you. That was probably the closest I'd ever get to an apology. I didn't say anything. He exhaled. So what happens now? I studied him. the man who had once controlled everything, the man who had defined me in ways I had spent my whole life trying to undo. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need his validation. I had already won. You move on, I said simply. You figure out what life looks like when you're not the center of the world anymore. He let out a dry laugh. And you? I smiled. I build. 1 year later, the new Parker Logistics headquarters was finished. A towering glass structure standing where the last of my father's malls had been demolished. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement, a monument to everything I had built on my own. I walked through the main floor, passing employees who worked for me, in a company that bore my vision, not my father's. Natalie had disappeared from the public eye. Mom and Dad had moved into a smaller house, still clinging to whatever dignity they had left. And me, I was finally free. The last thing my father ever said to me was, "You'll understand when you have your own family." Maybe he was right, but if I ever did, I'd make sure they never had to fight to be seen. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to be the forgotten son. And I'd never let that happen again. Final words. A reporter once asked me, "Do you regret not making amends with your family?" I just smiled and said, "They called me selfish, but they never realized this was the first time in my life I was finally living for myself."